You are now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
I was lying down in the house of my grandfather, Malalel, when I saw in a vision heaven purifying and snatched away. And falling to the earth, I saw likewise the earth absorbed by a great abyss, and mountains suspended over mountains. Hills were sinking upon hills. Lofty trees were gliding off from their trunks and were in the act of being projected and of sinking into the abyss. Being alarmed at these things, my voice faltered. I cried out and said, "The earth is destroyed." Then my grandfather Malalel raised me up and said to me, "Why dost thou thus cry out, my son? And wherefore thus thou dost lament?" I related to him the whole vision which I had seen. He said to me, "Confirmed is that which thou hast potent the vision of thy dream, respecting every secret sin of the earth. Its substance shall sink into the abyss, and a great destruction take place. Now, my son, rise up and beseech the Lord of glory, for thou art faithful, that a remnant may be left upon the earth, and that the earth shall there be a great destruction." Enoch, chapter 83, verses 4 through 6. It seems to me that in this is seeing and envisioned what had occurred previous to the coming destruction, which would be the flood of Noah's day, and that the Most High was showing him what Gary, you and I had spoken about yesterday evening in talking about how the earth became without form and void in Genesis 1 and verse 2. And so I'm your host, everyone. This is Garcia. This is Secrets Build, and I have as special guest with me this evening, Gary Wayne. Gary, you there, brother?
I am, and so happy to be back for evening 2, and very much looking forward to the second part of our conversation.
Yes, me too. And for those that missed it, last night we started the discussion of the war in heaven. And this evening we will follow up in speaking about how the two incursions, that of the rebel angels prior to the antediluvian age, connect with the war in heaven and also with the earth becoming without form and void. And also the follow-up with regard to the 200 watchers descending down upon Mount Hermon, and how their interdiction into the affairs of humanity led to the race of giants that is described as being born, and also that led to the destruction as far as with regard to Noah's flood and the incursion of the giants with regard to the war in Canaan land during Joshua's time. So, Gary, if you would give out all your website contact information and then comment on what I said, and we'll proceed forward.
Sure. My website is the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's Genesis 6 with the number 6. And you can contact me through my Genesis 6 Conspiracy email off of that website. And you can also check out a generous excerpt of every chapter that I have in my book, so you can get a good feel for it. You can also link into barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com, amazon.ca, and the Kindle version off the website, as well as get a signed copy if you're interested in getting one that's signed by myself. You can also follow me and contact me through my Facebook site, Gary Wayne Timeline. And, I post there regularly with a major posting every week. And I also have a couple Genesis 6 conspiracy pages. And I'm also contributing regularly to the newly formed Gary Wayne Genesis 6 conspiracy group. And you can also follow me on Twitter at GaryWayne63, at GaryWayne63.
All right, most excellent. Well, I know that this particular topic falls in line with much of your research and all the information that you brought forth in the Genesis conspiracy, which, for those that don't know, is a very elaborate and detailed book covering these topics from all cultures and all mythologies and uniting the premise, the theme of the mythology with that of the biblical narrative. And so Gary has summarized and put together the puzzles, the pieces of the puzzle of truth in showing and documenting and layout the fullness of the story that we began in discussion yesterday and also in previous shows and series that we've done. And so, if you would, Gary, talk about the premise of as far as the Genesis 6 and also your research with regard to the dual incursion, as there being a separate antediluvian incursion of angels. I call that the rebel angels, and the war in heaven, the 1/3 that joined Lucifer in rebellion. And then also we'll go forward and speaking about the Watchers and how it was that you came to understand these as different events.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that last night in terms of understanding different passages in the Bible and also connecting what other cultures and other religions have to say about prehistory and chronology and the fitting in of what took place seems to have a better fit when you look at the angelic rebellion happening before Genesis 1:1 to 1:2, where you have a renewal or a recreation of the earth. Some people call this the gap theory. I like to call it the renewal of the earth because, as in Psalms 104:30, it talks about the Holy Spirit that is shown in Genesis 1:1 to 2, that when God sends the Spirit, the earth is renewed. And I think that's a direct reflection of what was going on. And the connection is that the earth became void and formless, which is the other way to translate that verse, which is not standard dogma within the church and Christianity, but there are clearly two different ways you could translate that verse. And that because of the fallout of this rebellion of the angels, that the earth was destroyed somehow, some way. And I think that when we look at understanding that that is a separate event and everything that happens from day one forward is a result of that angelic rebellion and the revenges that not only the Watchers but Satan will participate in as they continue the rebellion starts to make a lot more sense.
Yeah, I fully agree. And again, those that missed it, the show that we did last night was deeply profound, and it covered a lot of what we're going to be touching upon briefly here, but we'll continue in moving. But we spoke about how even in the book of the Secrets of Enoch in chapter 29, you have being established there that the rebel angels were cast out on the second day. And even in books like Paradise Lost, you have Milton speaking about in premise the God giving authority to the Son, to Christ, which we also covered from the Gospel of Barnabas, how there's a section which Satan talks about even his being the first created archangel, how they were established, Michael and Raphael and others, Gabriel, that they were all created by the Son and the Father, the Holy Trinity, and that the pre-existing Godhead is what established, as it says in John chapter 1, even all of the angels and all of the other forces of both light and darkness, and that previous to the rebellion, there was still unity, and that there was no evil and no duality. But when Lucifer decided to try to exalt himself above the stars and the clouds of God in establishing his throne, then things shifted, and the Most High had to accommodate that rebellion, and even what we are dealing with now with the Second World Age and are incarnated into flesh form. I believe that all has part to play in the duality of what is this ongoing temporal knowledge of good and evil situation that we are contending with and learning from. But that at some point, things will be restored back to their former state.
Yeah, exactly. And we also covered off about Job 34 or 38, 4-7, when all of the angels sang for joy in unity of the creation, which is not what is going on with the creation of days 1 through day 6. And that in a lot of traditions outside the Bible, but certainly the splitting of the waters is seen as a rebellion. And because if that rebellion wasn't put down at that time, then the waters would not remain separated and the earth would go back into chaos. And what I think what that's talking about in those narratives is that perhaps as what Enoch was referring to when the angels are cast down out of heaven, they are objecting and rebelling to the renewal of the earth. And I think they're cast down. And I think that's when they start, even though they still will have authority over the earth for this age as watchers and as Satan as being the prince of this world. I think that they are in full objection to what they believe God is going to do, because with the rebellion, there's going to be consequences. It's been put down. They have not been put into the abyss. There's more things to be played out. They're just not 100% sure what's going to happen, but I believe that they know that with the renewal of the earth, that things are going to start to slide not in their favor.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to read this passage. It's from the Legends of the Jews, and it establishes the premise of how the Lord God had to accommodate the rebellion and how it kind of shifted as far as with regard to this Second World Age and the renewal that we're talking about of the earth, which in my opinion seems absolutely clear, especially when you look into the Strong's Concordance with regard to the Hebrew terms selected for alluding and referencing the earth becoming without form and void. It says, the creation of the world, however, could not take place until God had banished the ruler of the dark. Retire, God said to him, for I desire to create the world by means of light. Only after the light had been fashioned, darkness arose, the light ruling in the sky and the darkness on the earth. And again, in yesterday evening show, we spoke about how in Psalms 82, it also describes and connects to darkness being on the face of the earth, and that the foundations of the earth had been confounded and overthrown. And that we see that being played out also in Jeremiah 4, verses 23 through 28, and the same terms that are linked to tohu wabohu in Genesis 1, verse 2. The same terms are used in there. And so would you speak about that as well, Gary?
Just clarify what you're looking for me to talk about there.
Yeah, the Genesis, the connections between Genesis 1:2, the terms tohu wabohu, and
right.
Jeremiah 4, the verses 23 to 28, which uses the same terms and speaks about a time when there was no man, and yet all the cities of the wilderness were destroyed.
Yeah, and it just, again, I know some people don't like to connect that one with the renewal of the earth. I'm talking about Jeremiah, but it is certainly an odd sort of wording. And then when you look at, the word tuhu and buhu as they are used in the original Hebrew for form, which is tuhu, which means, being desolate and a desert and figuratively a worthless sort of thing. And God doesn't create anything in vain, as is talked about in Isaiah, which is also the same word that's used for the word void, which is buhu, which means empty, waste, and an undistinguishable ruin. And I just look at how those words that come out of the ancient Hebrew, and they just sort of, I don't know, they just sort of jump out at you to say, hey, this is talking about something that wasn't made perfect to be lived in, which Isaiah clearly says that he did not create the earth in vain, and he created it to be inhabited. And clearly something has gone on here that has changed. And so I think Jeremiah is just underlining that as it goes back into an uninhabited place. And I also think, that we need to also throw in 2 Peter, and I know we didn't talk about 2 Peter last night.
Yes.
But again, 2 Peter 3:5 and 3:6, it is talking about, and just before that in 3:4, where it's talking about, from the beginning of creation, then it moves on into 3:6. It says, whereby the world that was, being overflowed with water, perished. Well, that's not a flood, because the world didn't perish. Like, not everything was killed on it. It did not become void and formless. And yet, this is talking about, the world that was being overflowed with water. And this has got a lot to do with sort of the ethra from space. It's the separation of the water from above from the water from below. And I think it's got a lot to do with how chaos is prevented from keeping the world an empty place. So, and the other thing that it goes on in 2 Peter, it says, but the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word kept in store, reserved into fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. And the next destruction of the earth is by fire. So I think this whole thing is just talking about something before the flood, something before the separations of the waters that eventually came back together and caused the earth to become void and formless. And again, that is the other way you can translate Genesis 1:1 to 1:2.
Right. And the other really relevant thing with regard to 2 Peter is that, as you said, he's talking about the complete destruction, which again is the first here where it says the heavens and the earth which are now. So he's speaking about the recreation, the reformation of the earth, which is described in Genesis 1:2 ongoing. And he also then connects the destruction of this age by fire to the current world age that we are living in, which shows that the first one, the first world age, and how the earth became without form and void, that this particular destruction he's describing, where whereby the world that then was being overflowed with water perished, that is the allusion again back to Genesis 1:2, because it was that overflow of water that destroyed that world age, and which necessitated the recreation of it that we see ongoing in Genesis 1:2 and going forward. Yes. I agree with you.
And I was going to just sort of insert as well is that when you look at the word "in the beginning," as it leads into the first chapter of Genesis, it's also in 2 Peter, where it says from the beginning of creation. So if you look at the Hebrew word for what in the beginning translates from, it's the word rishith, if I pronounce that properly, meaning in the first place or the first time or the first fruit, right? So in the beginning, in the first time, the heavens and the earth were created, and then it moves on into Genesis 1:1 to 1:2, and I think when we look at that coming out of Greek in Second Peter, it means from the commencement or the origin or the first state or the first magistrate or the first principality and rule of angels and demons.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and again, this is clearly talking about an age when the earth was destroyed, and then it was renewed. And is this former age the time of the angelic rebellion? Because it's connecting in its Greek meaning, the first estate, which is talked about in Jude. Left there the habitat of the first estate, and the powers and the principalities and the rule of angels and demons. It just is too much going on here that's connecting it to say that you just stick with standard dogma. This is a serious possible alternative translation of Genesis 1:1, and we add in other verses from the Bible. And I also kind of like to refer to some verses that are out of Job, which are talking about, and again, some people, believe that Job is an antediluvian scripture. There's no real proof for that other than the language in Job is very, very strange. And Job is generally considered written, about 1000 BC to 1500 BC. But depending on when it was written and how you understand it, when it says things like in Job 8:8, when it says, "For inquire, I pray thee, of a former age, and prepare thyself to search for your forefathers." I mean, what are they talking about with a former age? Or right. Job 33, it says, "For want and famine, they are solitary, fleeing into the wilderness in former time, desolate and waste." Yes. That's Tuhu and Boohoo, right? I mean, it's what is it? It seems to be referring to the first ancestors and before and in the beginning. So it's I think there's a lot of ammunition to say that there's legitimacy to translate it different. And then when you look at Genesis 1:28 in the King James Version, it clearly says, "Replenish the earth." Right. Now, that's a very odd statement to say if the earth hadn't been renewed, because this is in day 6, right? Right. So, but other translations will just say "fill the earth," because again, there's two ways you could translate that. So, again, there's just all of these things pointing towards an age before day 6 or day 1, and in an age where there was business and things being done in the universe by Satan and many of the angels who, for some reason, decided they were going to rebel against the omnipotent one, but yet we're not totally convicted to go to the lake of fire at that point. It may be a predetermined conclusion, but they're not there. Then there's almost like a trial going on thereafter. And it's almost like either a trial being played out or a play being played out with the introduction of the renewal of the earth and the new beings that are being created, including the commission of Adam and Eve and the descendants. And what happens and how this plays out is either going to make the rebellion possibly plausible for the fallen angels, or it's going to convict them. And so the angels do not want Adam raised above them in the future time, and they're going to do everything they can to make sure that humankind is usurped or destroyed, and that it makes a plausible case because of human rebellion that their rebellion was plausible and that they could live in another realm, as we talked about last night, or another universe or another location, free from God's oversight. Right.
Yeah, and again, that all ties to the Lucifer wanting to exalt himself and being like the Most High. That was the whole point of their rebellion, and their establishing here in a mockery, I believe, a counterfeit, these megalithic sites in these pyramidal forms, that they were creating what they had seen in the heavens. In my opinion, that the Mount of the Congregation, all of those things are also connected to the megalithic structures, the temples, the pyramids that are found worldwide, created by these antediluvian races.
and those may be structures used in a good way that are in heaven, because, and the only reason why I mention that, and there's nothing to substantiate it, is that they like to counterfeit everything. Just like Lucifer wants to be like God, and they want to do everything like God. So when they copulate with the human females, they create a counterfeit spirit. So another counterfeit, right? And they're trying to emulate and counterfeit seemingly everything, just as Antichrist is a counterfeit Christ. Just as the false prophet is a counterfeit false prophet. Just as the new age of Aquarius and the new Atlantis is a false millennial age, also known as the Third or Fourth Reich, depending on you want to look at past or future in terms of what they're trying to counterfeit. Everything is going to be like what is in heaven, but slightly different in a counterfeit manner, just as they are trying to create a false trinity between Satan, a female goddess, and a male son, whether it's Horus or it's the future Antichrist. Everything is a counterfeit.
Yes. All right, we'll be right back, everyone. All right, welcome back, everybody. I did want to bring up a passage from Ezekiel chapter 26 that we did not cover last night either, and it's a very interesting passage. And this particular latter half of the chapter, it says, "Thus saith the Lord God to Tyrus, shall not the isles shake at when the wounded cry, when the slaughter is made in the midst of thee? Then all the princes of the sea shall come down from their thrones, and lay away their robes, and put off their broidered garments. They shall clothe themselves with trembling. They shall sit upon the ground, and shall tremble at every moment, and be astonished at thee. And they shall take up a lamentation for thee, and say to thee, how art thou destroyed that was inhabited of seafaring men, the renowned city, which was strong in the sea, she and her inhabitants, which terror to be on all that haunt it. Now shall the isles tremble in the day of thy fall, yea, the isles that are in the sea shall be troubled at thy departure. For thus saith the Lord God, when I shall make thee a desolate city, like the cities that are not inhabited, when I shall bring up the deep upon thee, and great waters shall cover thee, when I shall bring thee down with them that descend into the pit, with the people of old time, and shall set thee in the low parts of the earth, in places desolate of old, with them that go down to the pit, that thou be not inhabited, and I shall set glory in the land of the living. I will make thee a terror, and thou shalt be no more. Though thou be sought for, yet shalt thou never be found again, saith the Lord God." Considering this particular passage and the story of the destruction of Atlantis, in my opinion, this seems to have, again, those deeper layers of meaning in connection to what we were talking about, Gary. Gary, you there, brother? Gary. All right, let me check, make sure. We're not hearing you. Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm back now. My mic was kicking in and out.
Okay, no worries. All right.
Yeah, not sure why, but it was kicking in and out. So I was just mentioning, and last night you mentioned Berosus, and Berosus has some interesting things to say as well, that he believes that in his writings that the term, Babylon was just an allegory for the ancient city before the flood that was destroyed, which would be Atlantis. And when I look at that passage out of Isaiah, all I can think of is this is talking about a place where the kings of the earth are known, the renowned ones. It's like this is a place so much like Nippur or Atlantis, where the ancient kings and the great ones of old were ruling from, and that God is going to rise up the flood and just destroy it. If I'm sure it has several meanings to it, because not only is it talking about Tyr, but it's also, I think it's talking about Atlantis, and I also think it's talking about a future city of trade as an allegory of the end time Babylon, which is also a city.
Right.
So I think it's going back, present, and future as it mixes in interesting details that can in my opinion can only apply to an antediluvian city.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. And the mention of a people of old and a city of old, and we know that the Atlanteans, as described in Plato's work, Critias and Timaeus, and talking about them being a seafaring people, and how even way back then that they were trying to establish this global domination, this new world order type system that we also see being replicated or in attempt during Nimrod's time.
Yeah, exactly. And this whole understanding of old is an old city is not a term to be taken lightly. When we look at what the Bible has to say about those types of terms, anytime it says, in ancient times, or days of old, this is always referring to the antediluvian epoch. It is not, just a few generations before. It's typically all antediluvian. So I love Isaiah in that verse or that chapter, because it just speaks to things that I sort of embrace in my worldview of what happened in the ancient Atlantis, and certainly Plato. Gives a very, very strong advocation for Atlantis, and Atlantis is considered part of Greek history. There are so many historians that testify to Plato's account, including I think it was Solon, who traveled to Egypt to read the story from the pillars of the Egyptian priests, that I think that history is saying that this old city is something that happened. And I think there might have been more than one culture that was in the antediluvian epoch that I've spoken to many times. But yeah, I really like what Isaiah has to say and Berosus has to say about Babylon and Tyr and the ancient city that was destroyed by the flood.
Yeah, me too. Again, and these are some of those connections that when you open yourself to the possibilities of the premise that we are bringing forth here with regard to the prior times, or what the Egyptians call Zep Tepe, and you study the ancient writings, the commentary put forth by Berosus and Mantio and others, then this is, even the Sumerian Kings list, it stands for, and as weird as it seems to us, and as much as modern humanity doesn't understand it, it ties in connection to those things that we are asserting here. And then again, the rule of these seraphic dragon-like angels, the feathered serpent worldwide, and the reverence of them.
Yeah, in Berosus, he had access to the ancient clay tablets from the temple.
Right.
Tablets that were created before the flood. And he was a highly respected individual of his time contemporary with Alexander the Great, and celebrated as an astronomer and a historian, and was commissioned to write books by after Alexander died, to record history so it wouldn't be lost.
Yeah, and he was specifically writing about this antediluvian, this prior times, this first times, or the age where the demigods ruled, and that even in Hesiod, and speaking about works and days, he describes this golden age when these demigogic type beings ruled here on the earth, and then the different later races of these demigod peoples, and also the heroes of old, as we see the men of renown in Genesis 6. I mean, all these things come forth in great elaboration when you investigate with open mind these possibilities.
Yeah, exactly. And there are other accounts, as you get into the Bible, particularly the Psalms and Amos, about conflagration that's greater than is talked about in the Bible, that it's more than just a flood. And similar, I mean, Enoch talks about a conflagration of cataclysms as well. So, even to the point where, mountains are being suspended upon mountains. There's a great upheaval that's going on, which is why we have a lot of these underground cities. And, again, you have, let's say in the Veda traditions, you have Dwarka and Malavalpuram, if I pronounced that correctly, as these as they believe, as antediluvian cities that have the same type of destruction that Atlantis has.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Dwarka. Then we see like places like Yonaguni over there near Okinawa, Japan. Yep. Yes, and then these pyramidal complexes that are said to be off the coast of Cuba, and there are other places that are discovered and that have been mentioned, but that are not being talked about in any great detail, and also at the bottoms of lakes like Lake Titicaca, and even here in America, I believe it's Lake Michigan. They describe how there's the megalithic structures and city type complexes at the bottom of that lake, and some of the Great Lakes here. I mean, so, yeah.
All around the world, there's underwater ruins that are unaccounted for, and of an age that are more ancient than it could be possible with the secular chronology. So there's something that's going on that is being missed by not only secular history, but by most people as they understand how we came out of evolution, supposedly. Like, none of this fits into that sort of scenario, and only when you dig deep do you start to see a pattern that does start to make sense if you're prepared to look at things, but always measure things against what the Bible says, just to make sure that directionally it's going in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Lately, and I had mentioned last night how I was I'm close to releasing my new book on Paradise, the Sides of the North, and the Mount of the Congregation, and how some of it is tied to the study of, these ancient mythologies connected to Asgard and Shambhala, Thule, and some of these other ancient places. Can you talk about, have you looked into research any of that, anything with regard to the North Pole and its possible connections to Eden? William Warren, his book Paradise, the North Pole as the Cradle of Humanity. Done any research on any of that kind of stuff?
Nothing extensive, but I mean, there is this mythos that is out there, whether or not it is Asgard or Thule, which I think are probably pretty similar places as they're understood in more of the Norse mythology. But you know, I mean, you have these places that are located sort of all around the world, and my understanding is that when you start to piece that together, it's almost like there were many of these underground places or portals into another dimension through the earth, and they're known, you know, by many different names, like, you know, Argatha, which is also known, it comes out of the Nagas as, you know, the underworld, and it's the inner earth, or the, you know, part of the hollow earth, as it sort of goes into that sort of theory. And you know, the Buddhists also, you know it as Agarte, and the Theosophists in the late 1800s and early 1900s, you know, linked that to somewhere in Tibet, and it was inherited by the Asura and other sorts of demons, which are the bodiless spirits of part of the giants out of the Vedas. So you have this sort of Nephilim connection, and then, you know, the Hindus, they called it Aryavartha, and that comes out of the Aryan tradition, the same as the Thule does, and it's the land of the noble ones, where the Vedas came from. And Shambhala is the other name that they use for it that you already mentioned. And, you know, the Chinese have another place called Shitian, Hsitin. It's a sort of a Western kind of paradise. And the Tuatha De Danann also had the underworld or the other world that they went to, just as Anwin is encoded into the King Arthur mythology. And you know, the Russians, they have a place that's called, if I can remember right, something like Belodai. And also out of the Quiché Maya, they have these people that are the lords of Xibalba, who are owl-faced type of individuals, similar, because there's two versions of the snakes in that sort of bird face or owl face or raven face, feathered serpents. They lived in a place, you know, for ghosts and demons in the underworld of the earth. And all of these stories just seem to have this connection to whether or not it's an Eden or it's another world, or it's these ancient locations under the earth. You know, just as Gilgamesh visited Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh in the bowels of the earth, whatever the heck that means. And I think it means, you know, somewhere under the earth. But being located in the North Pole is not generally where I get a sense. So most people point towards Antarctica when they're looking at that. And some of the theories that go along with that is that could also be, you know, Atlantis. And during the last flood cataclysm, the crust shifted and slid Antarctica or Atlantis down south. I mean, again, I don't know how true that will be. And the other thing is when we read the book of Enoch, it is talking about portals over and over and over and over that go into these places, and into the earth. And one place is even called Middle Earth in Enoch, which I found very, very interesting. And he also calls some of these places in the earth called, you know, hollow places. So I think they're all talking about, to bring it to a point, a similar notion. But I do believe there's more than one location, because Enoch clearly talks about several locations in the earth.
Right. Yeah, and even go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, was I sort of hitting on the areas that you were referring to, or did I take that in a different direction?
No.
Yeah,
You said you hadn't studied it very much, but you brought up a very elaborate answer, and so that was a really good answer. And you know, again, what makes your work so unique is your ability to bring forth and draw from so many diverse cultures and mythologies and unifying all that content in together, because I do believe there are these underlying connections, the truth that underlies all of them, and that they're all, you know, speaking about even if it's not even the exact same place, but different degrees of all of these kind of mythological places and sites as they were celebrated by all these cultures.
Yeah, and if indeed there was as many as 7 to 9 major civilizations in the antediluvian epoch, and they had all access, there would be these types of places all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we see that too, again, with the megalithic sites that we are discovering and that we find all over the world. And that even to a lot of these cities that are built near the very upper, parts of the mountains. And I think that those were established, in showing a lot of them were established at the tops of mountains because that was after the flood. Some of that was all that was showing with regard to the waters then receding, and that we see at the bottoms of these oceans and lakes, those cities and sites, though they were created previous to the water levels changing, and are very much older in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you would, can you, before we get to the next break, kind of just talk about what you see as happening when, the rebel angels, for whatever reason, they were cast out, then being established here, their interdiction into what was the pre-Adamic humans, and because it seems also that all of these cultures, because we see the same kind of pyramidal structures being built in different ways, that they are all connected to one, and that in some way even James Churchward, he talks about the Mu as being the mother culture. Can you kind of speak about all that before we go to break?
Sure, and so that people understand, when we talk about several different civilizations, Mu is certainly one of them, and thought to be located in the Pacific Ocean. And then there was another civilization that was brought up that was before these other 7 to 9 civilizations, called Lemuria, that in the occult is thought to believe to have seeded these other civilizations. But certainly you have Sumeria, and you have Atlantis, and you have Mu, and Mu is the as some of the main names of these ancient civilizations. And Mu is the one that seems to have had an influence on the Central American and the Vedas and the Indian culture, both before and after the flood. And there's connections back between the two as well. So this is a concept that is larger than what we get in the Bible, where we're kind of looking at one civilization as it's being talked about, as it's related to the descendants of Cain and the descendants of Seth by Adam, and seemingly is the Sumerian civilization. But that doesn't mean there weren't necessarily other civilizations. Now, as it comes out of but it does have some answers for context as you look at some of this, for answering some of the mysteries of Genesis. So what happens with these people created in day 6 is that they are hunters and gatherers, and they're clearly described as that in Genesis 1. And they're told to multiply and fill the earth. And the gods come along, the watchers, and say, in return for a steady diet of food that we're going to provide you, and that you can be domesticated, you are going to worship us, and you are going to serve us, and we will teach you knowledge and writing, and you are going to build these megaliths, and you set up these same types of pantheons around the world. The gods are all the same in the different pantheons, almost identical, just with different vernacular names. And then you have the similarities of the the giants that are in all of these cultures. You have the pyramids that are in all of these cultures. You have the mystical religion that is in all of these cultures. You have the flood that comes along afterwards, because these demigod giants that are produced by the offspring of the gods who are ruling over them, and the human females that they choose, create these demigods. And all of a sudden you get all of these coincidences all around the world that you can't account for unless they're telling the same story, but maybe not quite the same Genesis story, but from a parallel civilization story. But yet the consequences and the outcome and the events are all the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another thing that I think is very interesting, and that science does not give a lot of credence to, is that there were connections and that there was trading going on, that there was relationships established amongst these peoples worldwide. You know, even with the fact that some of the mummies, they have discovered, you know, drugs from in South America in some of the bodies of these mummies there in Egypt, you know, tobacco products and different things like that, which show that something was going on as far as their interaction with one another. And
yeah.
You know, and we don't give any kind of credence to that.
Yeah, clearly their technology was more advanced. They communicated more, and they would, because they not only did they have the 7 sacred sciences that were being developed, they had the Watchers providing all of the secrets of heaven, all of the illicit knowledge to develop these civilizations very, very quickly. And they did communicate, and then they did trade. And in fact, according to Plato in Critias and Timaeus, is that the Atlantean Empire, which had 10 nations in its empire, was trying to take over the other civilizations around the world. They were stopped eventually by the Athenians, according to Plato, but they were in contact and they knew of each other, and they had the ability to get around the world.
Right. Yeah. All right, we'll be right back, everybody, for second hour. All right, welcome back, everybody, for second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio. I have a special guest with me this evening, Gary Wayne, author of Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Gary, wanted to ask you about Operation Cabaret. The British SAS forces, before the end of World War II, they went down to Antarctica and they were chasing the Nazis, and they describe in some of the information that has since come forth, released by some of those that were participants within this special operation, that they discovered the Nazis were building a structure, a base called New Schwabenland down there in Antarctica. But what the interesting aspect of it was is that they were building into an already existent ancient structure. Can you comment on that? And also, can you talk about, if you have done any research with regard to what's going on in Antarctica?
Yeah, so I mean, what we do know is exactly what you stated about what the Nazis were doing down there, and they were building bases, and it is believed that there was some sort of structure that was already there. And some people are speculating that there were pyramids. And the activity that's been going on in Antarctica, the amount of traveling back and forth at a sort of fever pitch right now, how they've sort of blocked Antarctica off from the world since the late 40s because of this, all leads to all sorts of speculation. The problem gets to be is that there are so many different variations as to what's going on down there, that there are it's located to an entrance to the inner earth that's talked about in Enoch and in some of the other places that we talked to, or portal into other dimensions, as into like in the abyss, and again what is talked about in Enoch, that there are Nephilim in stasis there, that it's an alien base. That's where the Anunnaki have come back. That's where the gray aliens are located. It's just rampant with all of these different interesting theories, but nobody has anything that has any real meat on it other than the activity and the high level of people that are going back and forth now is getting to a point where you almost think that they're ready to announce something to the world. Mm-hmm. And if my sense is right, whatever they're going to bring out, and it could be all of the above, right? I mean, all of that's possible. Right. But I think whatever it's going to be is it's going to change everybody's preconceived ideas, and it will allow them to turn the world in a direction and very quickly in a way that was not able to be done before the revelation that they're going to come out with. And I know even up a month or so ago, people are saying, well, it's close, it's going to come out, but the information hasn't come out. But I do believe it has to do with the ancient civilizations, and I do believe it has to do with aliens, at least as part of the intermix, whether or not you believe in aliens or not. I think it's going to be one of those things that has to be that large to change people's preconceived ideas.
Mm-hmm. Any comment on the Ark of Gabriel, the leader of the Russian Orthodox Church supposedly going down there, and even individuals like John Kerry? There was also, previous to this, I guess about a year or so ago, release of articles by a Preston James, I believe he is. He writes for veterans, and he was talking about the sudden appearance of Marduk, which we know to be, one of these Nephilim deities, and that they were talking about all of these presidents, even Obama, going to meet him. Can you talk about all that?
Yeah, so I mean, what you're doing is underscoring what I was talking about, is this fever pitch of high-level people going down to visit it. And Marduk in the alien mythos is part of the Anunnaki. So depending on whether or not you want to look at the Anunnaki as gods and or demigods, because there's two different levels of them, or as aliens, is that they have been meeting with this Marduk and a few other names that are thrown out. That again, that all comes out of ancient history. So, but again, we're not getting information that we can really, unless you're getting better information than I am, that we can really say for sure exactly what's going on. And we don't know what the delay is, because all the supposed credible sources were saying we should have heard what the revelation is by now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing that seems to be being released is the discovery of pyramidal structures. Not only Linda Moulton Howe was talking about one being discovered in Alaska, but then also there are scientists that are specifying and talking about multiple pyramids being discovered in the Antarctic region. And so, again, that all, considering that they had to have been built before the ice, covered all them, shows that they are very ancient indeed.
Well, and the rapid discovery of these pyramids is not just because the archaeologists are doing a magnificent job, and I'm not saying that they aren't, but I think it's coming from inside information to locate and find these pyramids, because I think they're going to be utilized again, whether or not it is in the universal religion, it's in some sort of technology, some sort of magnetic stream, whatever you want to speculate on it. They're turning up, whether or not they're in Russia, Romania, China, Alaska, under oceans. I mean, everywhere they're discovering these pyramids, and it's just in rapid fires. So that just doesn't happen. I think that's by design, and it's just, again, just slowly being laid out at this point in time to continue to prepare people for what they're going to reveal.
Right, right. Yeah, and then again, all this ties into, with regard to the strong delusion, the whole premise that the ancient aliens are our creators and that they're returning to save us from ourselves. The whole, as we were talking about with the counterfeit Messiah, the counterfeit, return of Christ, how the return of the ancient aliens, that all that would kind of, it would all counterfeit that, the Blue Beam Project, all that kind of stuff, that they're trying to trump and to bring forth in their own way what the Bible speaks about as the return of the real Savior Messiah.
Yeah, and so if you can connect all of that in, that they're coming back, whether it's from the 13th planet or whenever or however you want to make that sort of platform, is it makes it easy to transition these fallen angels for the end time that are going to be part of the earth, why they're there, and to deceive people as to why they're there, right? And but at the end of the day, I mean, they're going to ask the people of this world to fight for their freedom against the God of the Bible. But they're not going to classify God in the same way we do. They're going to turn him into this evil God and this dictator of the universe. But in their dualistic religion, it's good versus evil, and this is just ongoing. It's always at play, right? And you're always fighting for your freedom. And they're going to classify themselves as the children of light, the sons of light, just as Satan masquerades as an angel of light, and just as the Freemasons are children and the sons of light. I mean, light is one of their key allegories, which also is an allegory for knowledge, because they're all a cult of knowledge as well. But it's part of that whole justification and making it plausible so that you could deceive the elect if that were possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And for a lot of people, it is seemingly possible, because look at how many very well-researched individuals are accepting the premise that the ancient aliens are our creators. I mean, it is now accepted all over, that whole ancient alien, the ancient aliens program, all these people that they are parading on that show, which so many people look up to for guidance and instruction on how to understand these things. I mean, golly,
Yeah, and of course the question that they never answer and nobody tends to ask is if that is how Earth was seeded, well, who created the aliens?
Right, exactly, yes.
But nobody ever wants to go that far in the question. But I mean, I do like their research. I mean, they have great research. They just have a very, very agenda-orientated belief system that was created by Freemasons, right? So it's there to manipulate people into accepting the lie that is coming. And they're going to tell us that we are just one of many galactic species in the universe. Some are good and some are evil. And if we want our seat at the galactic table, then we're going to have to fight with the other rebels. And Lucifer is known by the occultists and the secret societies as the great rebel, the great free thinker, the one who liberates humankind. All of these allegories of what they're preparing us for is right out of polytheism.
Any idea on, and I'm not positive I asked you about this, but that Childhood's End, that whole series that came out where it talks about the return of these aliens as overseers, and also just recently I watched a really weird movie called The Arrival, and it was talking about how these aliens return in order to help humanity, because we would later help them.
They're coming here. Yeah, it was an interesting twist. And all of it, though, no matter how they do the twist, is to help humankind evolve into gods. That is what they're going to do, to the next level of evolution. And
bringing
so,
technology.
yeah, and bringing technology in support of that. And, as overseers, as watchers, that's what watchers means. I like to call what they did in the antediluvian epoch as, I call them the celestial mafia.
Right.
And, and again, they brought that world to this great level of technology that, everybody has been brainwashed to think that these were primitive people. They weren't primitive. I mean, they built these pyramids. They developed the sciences. History out of all cultures testifies to great civilizations of great technology. And I think that's why, our Messiah is told us that, as part of the signs of the end times and the things to be watching out, you have the days of Noah being inserted. And I think that's all of the days of Noah that, included the generation of Jared. And because Noah was part of that generation when in the days of Jared, where, as Enoch talks about, that the giants were created and the demigods were created from the offspring of angels. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the whole miscegenation, how everything became corrupted. And then the other thing that we're really not even talking about is the abomination that they instituted with the establishment of these pagan religions. The blood and victim sacrifice and the cutting the still beating hearts out of people and all that.
Yeah.
And so who knows what kind of what will be established by these ancient aliens in demanding compliance to this one world religion and this newly, this beast system that is coming into place.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, so very, very interesting times. And so what do you see on the horizon? I mean, with regard to where we are, and what are the kind of the main things that you're, kind of looking out for?
Well, I'm looking for 2017 to be one of those watershed years. I don't believe we're in the end time yet. I know there's a lot of speculation on September 23rd and the astrological sign of supposed Revelation 12. I don't buy into that. I know there's a lot of speculation on that, just as there was on the red moons a year or so ago. I'm a firm believer in that the all of the events have to be aligned up, because we can't be in the end time unless everything is in place, and not everything is in place yet. So, the sign of Revelation 12 happens at the midpoint of the tribulation. So, but I do think it could be part of that watershed event where things are going to start moving the world very quickly into that direction of universal religion and world government. And I'm expecting things this year that will really put a catalyst behind that, so to speak. So I'm looking for extraordinary events, and maybe this sign in the sky will be part of those astrological type of signs that are going to be used to scare people, to cattle herd people into world government and the world religion. I think there's that possibility that we're going to get that announcement out of Antarctica. I think there's a possibility that our financial markets could take a huge hit again this year. And I also know that when we look at some other things coming together, like the settlement of Israel, or the nation of Israel and Jerusalem, and if it's 70 years, are we in that window between 2017 and 2037 where the end time starts to begin, or as the Jewish people and the Israelites used to call the Messianic era, which is a period of time when that starts to come in. And just as you've got the prophecies of Jubilees, which puts 2017 as the start of the Messianic era that comes out of Jewish Kabbalism, or Jewish belief system anyways, for the prophecy of Jubilees. There's a lot of speculation that was put out a couple of years ago that it was 2017 where the U.S. dollar would have a whole bunch of issues, and certainly the Russians were promoting that. I was reading it in their newspapers when I was over there, and so there just seems to be a lot of things that I think I'm expecting to happen as we move into the latter part of this year, not to push us into the end time, but to start speeding up the process of putting the pieces of the puzzle into place.
Dropping the dominoes, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, as far as with the return of Christ, because I know a lot of people are speculating, and there's a lot of people that are talking about that this is when the rapture is going to happen. But again, we know that the Antichrist is revealed first, and that the false, the false Messiah, the beast system, all of that, the 10 regional United Nations, all that has to be brought up and come into place prior to the return of Christ. And so unless things, start popping over the next few months, it's got to be something other than the, rapture of the church or the catching away that so many people are looking for. Because again, the Antichrist is revealed first, all that comes into play, his reign, and even the two witnesses, which I believe will be Enoch and Elijah, that they are to come and also to convict the Antichrist and be killed in the streets of Jerusalem. And so, there's a lot that.
There's a lot of things that have to happen to be in the end times. And I would also throw in a third one. I think all three are going to come. And I think Elijah is going to be very much a part of the second Exodus with Jesus as well. But I also like the idea, of a third individual, which may be mixed in with the two witnesses, and maybe Enoch or Elijah has a different role. And that is the disciple that Jesus loved that John talked about. Because at the end of the book of John, I mean, it's just absolutely wonderful what he's talking about the disciple that Jesus loved, and we're not given a name of this individual, but it is very, very mysterious about what is said about them, and I don't know whether people are familiar with that or not, but I'll just sort of throw it out that Jesus had talked about this individual in a manner of that something to the effect. I'm just going to try and paraphrase it. Is that if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you?
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I remember that. Right.
Yeah, because I think as I recall, they were talking about him not dying or something to that effect, right? So it's just very, very important. And in fact, he even said, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me. I just looked it up. So I think there's a good, and it would be appropriate if you look at, you could make an argument for all three, because it would be so appropriate to have somebody who was an eyewitness to Jesus preaching to the world as one of the two witnesses about the new covenant. It would be so appropriate to have Elijah preaching about the old covenant, and that Israel is not obsolete. And it would be so appropriate to have Enoch speaking to the first apocalypse. Right. And these are the only three that are the possibilities. And I know the consensus is Elijah and Enoch, but I just like to throw in what Jesus was saying about, and I think his name is is Nathanael, but just my sort of deducing going through the scriptures as to who I think it is, because that's the disciple that knew Jesus before, or he knew him before he even saw Jesus. So,
what you just brought up, it reminds me of a story at the very end of the book of Enoch about the prophet Nur and how he was raising up this Melchizedek individual. and that it speaks about this child that he was taken up into the heavens and protected, I believe, by the archangel Michael. And it's interesting that this story is all mentioned, but then there's no other talk about it, and or any other reference that I've seen in the extra biblical materials to this particular individual. And so, that's a kind of a mystery as well.
Yeah, and I love the Book of Enoch because it has so much detail in it.
Right.
But it's not free of issues and corruptions, and but for the most part, directionally, and what it says about the Son of Man and Jesus is absolutely spectacular. But it does have a few issues in there that drive me up the wall. Enoch. Being said his age is 500 years old, and in another one 550, when we know Enoch, son of Jared, was taken to heaven at age 365.
Right.
So
Right.
But it's typical for the secret societies to corrupt some of these apocryphal books with some of their markers, and it could be just some of their markers that are in there.
Mm-hmm. And then we have to remember that this guy James Bruce, that he was a Freemason himself, right?
Yes, and a descendant of Robert the Bruce.
Right, yeah.
Right, and a Gnostic. So
right.
he did the original translations, and so there could easily be some markers in there, because there's a few things that are just a little bit odd. In one part of Enoch, it talks about the angels building the ark for Noah. Well, that happens in a lot of Gnostic versions, but it doesn't happen in biblical versions. So I just think it's been tampered with for the most part, because there's not a lot that's wrong. I mean, I put out a post a while ago and put out some of the items that are in there just to be careful of. But overall, I mean, I really like the Book of Enoch. Of all of the apocryphal books, that's the one I like the best.
Me too. I love the Book of Enoch, and I read it almost daily, study and read it. One of my most favorite books, and when I get up, the first thing that I try to do is to study the pseudepigrapha or other extra biblical materials, and I spend my first 2-3 hours just reading all this material before I come inside and begin to work on my books or other material as far as my computer. But I like to be with the creation and be with God's word, and to study it. And that's one of my most favorites. Can you talk about some of your most favorite extra biblical books? Well, I guess we'll pick it up when we come back from break. We're about 10 seconds out, but think about that, Gary, and we'll talk about some of that when we return.
Sure.
All right, we'll be right back, everybody, and we'll finish up with final segment. All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. So I want to know, Gary, some of the things that you like to study, and some of the texts you've been researching that you find comfort in, or that you find very interesting.
Yeah, I certainly like, as I mentioned, the Book of Enoch. I find interesting whether or not it's the Book of Yasher, but it's got some issues, and the Book of Jubilees has some issues. I mean, a lot of these books have some issues, even though I find them very, very interesting reading. But when I get down to the ones that I really like the best, that are sort of outside what a Protestant would consider the standard canon, is I like Second Ezra. And there's a few books of Second Ezra. It just has some wonderful prophetic things and some other insights that other books don't have. I also like Sirach in there. I also like the Book of Wisdom. Remarkable book in there. I also like, which isn't scriptural, I like to read Lewis Ginsburg's works on the legends of of the Jews and of Israel. It's got some interesting things in there based on what they bring down. And again, I know there's some Kabbalism and some other things in there, and it's not all truthful. But the source I really like to utilize to see what he has to say based on what the Bible says or some of the other texts might have is I really like Josephus, and he just brings out so many details, whether or not it's about the fall of Jerusalem or where the location to the temple was, or to the Essenes, or to prehistory, and the other historians that he will reference. He'll talk about things that we like to talk about out of prehistory on the giants and things like that. So those are, to run without running too big of a list, those are kind of the ones that are always up there for me.
Oh yeah, those are many of my favorites as well. And I like to research and study Philo as well. And I look at some of the church.
He's a little wordy though.
Very much so, right?
So you have to, if you're going to read, you have to read with patience. There's good stuff in it, but it doesn't get there very quickly.
Right. Yeah, you have to, find those nuggets. But yeah, I do. I like to read the ancient commentaries, and I even go ahead.
I also like a lot that's in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but I find it very contradictory of each other, and there's a whole mix of different things that are in there. So I put a lot less weight on the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah,
and the thing with the Dead Sea Scrolls is that they only gave us all those portions which are fragmented,
Yes.
And that's annoying.
Yes.
And they kept all the good stuff for themselves, like the full Aramaic text of the Book of Enoch and things like that. And so it
makes you wonder why.
Yeah, of course they're keeping and hiding the truth from us, but wouldn't it just be amazing to have an Aramaic version of the Book of Enoch? I mean, wow.
Yes. Yeah.
How fantastic it would be to study and to read that. And from what I understand, there were 2 full extant versions found. It wasn't just one. But, again, they give us all the segmented and fragmented and broken up pieces and keep all the good stuff for themselves. Who knows what else was even found. I did hear just recently a story of a whole another cave that was full of ancient manuscripts and texts, and yet it was emptied out by somebody, and they don't even know what was contained therein.
Yeah, I heard that as well. I've heard about that. I was when I first heard there was another discovery, I was kind of excited as to what they might have discovered. So, but again, we're not sure whether or not that's a cover story, so they don't have to be releasing anything to us.
Yes, exactly right. Also, did you hear about those the 70 metal books that were found in Jordan?
No.
There's it's an interesting, I'll share that story with you sometime, but there were 70 small metal books, and they are alluding to Christ as being Savior and Messiah, and so they date back to that particular time, but they are very old and very ancient, and they're not full texts that were extant like as far as scrolls, but they were metal books, and they contained information. And of course, this was 3-4 years ago that they were discovered, and there's been no mention or anything written about them and what they were about.
It's amazing how that stuff just sort of disappears behind vaults and closed doors, or only for the privileged.
Yeah, fully. Like, can you imagine wandering through the Vatican vaults and all that they've got down there? My goodness.
Yeah,
so much.
They say, my understanding is the Vatican vaults is only rivaled by maybe Freemasonry's vaults. But it is quite extensive. It must be quite a almost like a Indiana Jones competition to always be collecting these things over time.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, I bet it's like a whole Library of Alexandria. But I did
Well, yeah, and
find.
wouldn't it be nice to see? Wouldn't it be nice to see the rest of that's in the Manichaean Book of Giants, or as
Oh
people might
yeah,
understand it as the Book of
absolutely.
Og, right? Seeing
Right.
as it's missing quite a few chapters. I mean, that was
Mhm.
whether again, I don't know how accurate it is, but boy, is it ever an interesting read.
Yeah, and if for those that don't know what we're talking about, there is a Manichaean called the Ogdius, the Book of the Giant Ogdius, uh, and we did actually release it because we published a book through Sacred Word Publishing called The Collected Works of Enoch, and we include not only the Richard Lawrence translation and the R.H. Charles translation
Yep.
of the Book of Enoch and the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, but also um, chapter 100 of the Kebra Nagas, the other,
Yep.
just speaking about Semyaza and Azazel, the Book of the Giants, the Book of Ogdius the Giant. I mean, all that material all together, and looking at all that, it gives you, like even if we had a non-fragmented Book of the Giants to where we could understand the dreams, the visions of the giants, and how, they knew destruction was coming upon them. But
Yep.
yeah, all that would be fascinating to have a full
Yep.
extent copy.
Yeah, with Mawe. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was just, I had looked up the article that I was had mentioned to you. You can look it up by 70 metal books found in Jordan. And I'll post a link and I'll send it to you also. The name of this article, it says, "Could this be the biggest find since the Dead Sea Scrolls? 70 metal books found in a cave in Jordan could change our view of biblical history." And
Yeah.
this again was back in 2011, dated March 30th, 2011. And of course, we haven't heard anything further about all this and what they translated from it and what contents, what kind of stories were, all contained within. But
Yep.
at least we did hear the mention of their discovery. Just again, it's one of those things they keep all that kind of information from us.
They tend to. They tend to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you one other thing too. With the regard, we were talking earlier about Second Peter, where it talks about how the Second World Age would be destroyed by fire. And it says, "But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat, and the earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in a holy conversation and godliness, looking for and hasting unto the coming of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat." Now, what I wanted to ask you with regard to the new heaven and the new earth, because it says in Revelation, talking about the descent of New Jerusalem, uh, that there will be this new heaven and a new earth. And so I wanted to ask you what you thought the timing of that was, and whether you thought it preceded the millennial age, or if this event takes place at the end of where the Great White.
Yeah, I'm one of those ones who view things in a linear perspective, and particularly the Book of Revelations. So I will place the New Jerusalem and the New Heaven, and there won't be a temple at that time because God and the Word will dwell with us at the end of the 1,000 years. Because again, from a linear perspective, once we get past Revelation 19, we move basically into the millennial reign, and then I think it's in Revelation 21 where we get the new heaven and the new earth, and there's no temple. So my even though there's the language of the earth being burned up, I don't think it's totally destroyed in the end time, because people are going to be reigning with Christ on earth for 1,000 years. So there's going to be enough, and even if it was being almost totally burned out or bombed through nuclear weapons, I mean, God has the power to make that go away anyways. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely going to be restored, and I agree with you that it will be here on the earth that we reign with Christ for the millennial reign, God willing, and so considering hopefully that we're all found worthy. But it is interesting to me that that the language of the new heaven and the new earth is precedes supposedly the descent of New Jerusalem, which I thought, studying New Jerusalem, that it is New Jerusalem that we dwell within for the millennial reign. And so, is it saying that this occurs previous? And so I guess, all three, but I just wanted to, ask you.
Yeah. So I like I said, I'm more traditionalist on it, and I'm very respectful of all the different views of Revelation, and there's so many different views in terms of, does it move back and forth? Are all of the, the seals and the trumpets and the bowls actually one event? But I just find that it's easier to understand if you just let the story be told. But that's my way of approaching it, and it seems to line up the other prophecies quite well doing that. So, but I do recognize that you could look at those individual things and certainly line it up in a different manner than how the straight linear progression of Revelations would suggest.
Have you ever read the Sibylline Oracles?
No, I have not.
Well, these are fascinating texts, but specifically in the second book, at the latter half of that particular text, I think there's like 7 of them. It describes the end of days, and the oracle gives a mention as to the kind of like the timeline of Revelation as well. But it's interesting in that particular chapter, it talks about where the stars are cast down to the earth. It talks about that these stars being cast down, that's what starts the process of destroying the earth by fire in preparation for its recreation, which, I had never heard of that. But, again, all that, it makes sense. That the stars being these heavenly luminaries being cast down to the earth could, trigger and start that whole process. But I do want to give you a chance again, Gary, to give out your website, contact information where people can go to find and study your blog and your work, and then we'll, prepare for final commentary.
Sure. Best way to get a hold of me is through my website, Genesis6conspiracy.com, Genesis6, the number 6.com. I have an email on there to get a hold of me and ask me a question or make a comment. If you do have a question, I will definitely get back to you no matter which avenue that you're going to get a hold of me on. You can also check out the 98 chapters on my book. I have a generous excerpt on that. I have some interviews up there as well, and I have links to my social media sites from there. And also, you can link into buying a signed copy if you're interested in buying my book, or if you wanted to shop it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, there's links for that. And there's also a link to the digital version on Kindle. And you can also follow me or get a hold of me through Facebook under Gary Wayne, and 2 Genesis 6 conspiracy pages and a group that I participate in called the Gary Wayne Genesis 6 conspiracy group. And again, you can also follow me or get a hold of me through Twitter at GaryWayne63, at GaryWayne63. And, whether or not we're talking about the Genesis 1:1 to 1:2 or the day 6 versus Eden account, or what I was talking about on the book of Enoch or the book of Yasher, or if you want to know some of the issues that might be in the book of Jubilees on some of the Apocrypha, get a hold of me. I generally have attachments for that I can send you. All I'll need is your email address, and I can send you information on that.
Awesome. How goes the work on the new book?
Not so good. I'm
Oh no,
not so good. No, I was hoping through the summer months at my cottage where I'm at right now that I'd get some quality time to work on it, and I've not spent any time on it since I'm up here. So I need to get back at
cottage?
it. So. In northern Saskatchewan.
Awesome. Sounds wonderful.
Yeah, so it is.
Yeah.
I'm overseeing the lake as I'm speaking to you. So
how beautiful. Yeah, and when you're, encompassed by such beauty, it's difficult to want to be inside and writing and working, especially when, the summer. I love being outside during the summer and the spring, and so yeah, I can understand. Not getting things. I tend to get a lot done during the winter when we're kind of forced to be inside.
Yeah.
And so don't beat yourself up over it. Most certainly enjoy, especially if all the insanity that everybody predicts is coming or is on the horizon. We've got to most certainly enjoy these days. And
we do, because when it does come, you don't want to be here, but if it does come when we are here, it will be horrific. And for me, it's why we need to understand what happened in prehistory, because of the days of Noah as a warning, because nothing new is under the sun. And that I think there's so much language in the New Testament as well as the Old Testament to suggest that what happened in the past is going to replay in the end time. It's the same rebellion, whether it's Babel or the rebellion of the giants in the antediluvian epoch, or so many other attempts to do the same type of rebellion as what Hitler was trying to do. And if we don't understand the language and what happened in prehistory, we're going to be deceived. And we just have to understand. And, I put out a post this week on the wording about the great men in Revelations, and I was linking that back to, it's probably talking about, the mighty men of old, and it's that type of thing that we need to understand, because these bloodlines and this presence of the fallen angels has not gone away. And and even if you think it has, there's going to be more come, because they're going to be unleashed from the abyss very early on into the end time. And so things are going to happen so quickly, and you're going to be so inundated with brainwashing and utterly startling information and catastrophes and false prophets and miracles. And if you're not very firmly grounded in the Bible and what it's telling us, then you're going to be doubting, and you could be deceived.
Yes.
I would hope that even if that happens, that by the time the mark of the beast comes along, that people won't be deceived.
Mm-hmm.
But they're painting these chips and things, and however it's going to end up to be the mark, that you have to buy or sell, and will declare your loyalty to the New World Order, or fighting for rebellion, or to go into God. It's going to be presented in ways that are totally acceptable and natural for people to want to take and want to take that mark, right?
Yes.
And that's what they tend to do in the preparation process.
Right.
Let's get us ready to do that.
Right. So how are things up in Canada with regard to the political climate? I mean, is it getting crazy with regard to the police state measures and the tyranny? And or is it
it's relatively stable. It's not moving quickly in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain things that are incrementally moving in. Certainly, our current prime minister is very much a globalist and very much wanting to do more globalist things, and that's kind of where his participation really falls. And he's very much in bringing religions together, and he's all about that. And but he also comes from bloodlines, right? He's a descendant of the Sinclairs. So his mother's Margaret Sinclair.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and very much works with and family friends with the Aga Khan, and so you can see all of these sort of connections. And so, the good thing is that he's not an activist prime minister, and he's not a doer, right? He's more of a lightweight and more of a talker, but he does move things in the globalist direction. Mm-hmm. In fact, he just paid $10 million to a terrorist.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yes, yeah, big news up in Canada. So.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah.
If you could write 3 books, which I know you're working on one with the Lost Tribes right now, but if you had time to put together 2 others, what kind of titles, or what would the focus of those be?
Well, the next one I'll do after the Lost Tribes is going to be the Rapture. I haven't got a title on that, but I really want to put all of the verses together and tell a very, very straightforward story, and the other things that sort of intertwine around why the Rapture is very, very important. So, and after that, I'm not sure which one I would do after that, but it would certainly be prophetic in nature, and it may be World War III.
Wow, right on.
Yeah, so as opposed to Armageddon.
All right. Well, we appreciate you, brother, so very much. I thank you again, Gary, for coming on with us. The last 2 shows I think will be most spectacular, and that the listeners will enjoy our commentary and conversation. Give you chance for final dialogue. For final comment. We've got a minute and a half remaining.
So I think we covered off a lot of information in terms of a series of rebellion that was going on with the fallen angels, and that it hasn't played out yet. And the coming end time is that final rebellion, as Revelation 12 will talk about. Not only is Judea fleeing after the abomination in the middle part, but you have a war in heaven, and the balance of angels are being sent to the earth for the final stand. And so that is the denouement of and the climax shortly thereafter of this big stand, so that all the weight of the fallen angels will be behind Antichrist and all those fighting for God. But it's all, when we read in Revelation 19, it's over very quickly. So it won't take long. Right. The power is absolutely astounding. Right. That would be sort of what I think we need to finish on in terms of this 2-day show, and that even then it's not totally over, because Satan is going to be in prison for 1,000 years, and then he's released again. Yes. And there's another Gog-Magog war. Right. And so, again, I think it's just this progression that slowly nails all of the guilt into the rebellion that is unforgivable. And whether or not they die or they burn in the lake of fire, you pick your poison on that one. And we talked about Psalms 82 yesterday, but that will be the final act for the rebellion.